Hello, I'm James Pasley, the CTO for CapeClear Software. We've recently released a tech preview of CapeClear 7.5. One of the new features of this release is the mediation framework. We've taken all our experience of solving integration problems using the Enterprise Service Bus and created a new framework that's easier than ever before to use. It's also very flexible and supports a wide variety of use cases. Included in the tech preview is a sample mediation project, and this demonstrates 6 use cases. You can see that mediations provide you with an end-to-end picture of your integration solution. They start with the transport configuration, which is the source of your messages, include all the processing steps for your message, and also include the ultimate destination of the message, which might be a web service or could be routed on over another transport. Let's take a look at the 6 use cases included in this sample project. If you're an existing CapeClear user, some of these use cases will be very familiar to you. The first use case shows how an Excel spreadsheet can be transformed into XML and then passed on as a SOAP request to a web service. In this case, the mediation is created so that the Excel spreadsheet can simply be dropped in a directory and the server will pick it up from there. The second use case shows some features new to mediation. The first step in the mediation establishes the customer ID by extracting a value from the message. The second step then logs the message. As the customer ID has been established, these log files can be segregated on a per customer basis. The third step counts requests on a per customer basis. This is implemented using a custom Java mediation step, which is then configured using the Spring framework. The third use case shows how mediations can exist independently of web services. In this case, the incoming HTTP request is handled entirely by the mediation itself. The fourth use case shows how mediations can be chained together. It also shows how XML over HTTP can be supported by wrapping the incoming XML in a SOAP request before passing it on to a web service. This next use case reuses these mediation steps with the new email transports to allow incoming email messages containing XML to be processed by the web service. The final use case shows how the mediation framework can be used to construct simple routes, in this case a round-robin load balancing route. Let's take a look at the first use case in detail now. As you can see, it has 3 main components. The file drop transport, which tells the server to start polling a directory for Excel spreadsheets. The data transformation steps, converting the Excel spreadsheet to comma-separated values, then to XML, and then ultimately into the XML format required by the web service. And finally, the web service declaration itself. Mediations are configured in an assembly.xml file, and these can be standalone projects or, as in this case, attached to a web service project. Let's take a look at the web service project for this. The first entry in the assembly.xml file simply declares the mediation demo web service itself, and this is used later to deliver messages locally to the web service. Next we see the file drop configuration. The input directory is specified and the cron syntax is used to specify the polling interval. The routes2 attribute specifies that any files found in this directory will be delivered to the spreadsheet to shipping request mediation. This mediation has the steps necessary to transform the incoming Excel spreadsheet into a SOAP request for the web service, and then you can see on the routes2 attribute that request will be delivered to the mediation demo web service. So now let's see that in action. When I drop an Excel spreadsheet into the spreadsheets directory, the server picks it up, applies the mediation, and delivers it to the web service. The next use case shows how easy it is to achieve segregation of client data, and it also demonstrates including some custom Java steps in the mediation. As before, we have 3 major parts to this mediation: the source transport configuration, the mediation steps themselves, and the web service to which the message gets delivered. So let's take a look at the assembly.xml file for this use case. We have a declaration of the HTTP in transport. Included in that is the endpoint from which messages will be routed to the log and count mediation. The first step in this mediation is assign customer ID, and this extracts a customer ID from the request message using an XPath expression. This customer ID can then be used by later steps in the mediation or by the web service itself. The second step logs some details about the request. You can see how expat expressions are used to extract some of the data from the request message, and the customer ID established in the previous step is used so that the log files can be segregated. The final step is a custom Java step, and you can see here a reference to the Spring Bean for this. At the bottom of the assembly.xml file is Spring configuration, and you can see the Java class specified here. Let's take a look at the source code for this class now. The Java class must implement the process method from the custom mediation step interface. And you can see here the code where it accesses the customer ID, and it then increments a counter for each customer. Mediations can be tested in the same way you've always tested web services, using the web service tester. This next use case shows how mediations can be used in isolation from web services. The mediation in the previous use case counts requests on a per customer basis, and this mediation now can provide a simple report of customer activity. Here we have a declaration of a new HTTP in endpoint, which routes to the activity reporter mediation. Note that this mediation doesn't route the message on to another step, so the output of the mediation becomes the response for the HTTP request. This mediation is also implemented using some custom Java code. The configuration for this custom step shows how the Spring framework can be used to link two beans together. See how the custom message counter bean is declared as the counter property of the activity report bean. This means that the instance of the custom activity counter Java class will be passed to the count reporter Java class using the set counter method. You can see here that a simple text report of the customers and their counters is created and then returned as the text message. We can test this using the web service tester by sending an empty message to the mediation. This next use case shows how mediations can be chained together. It also shows us for the first time a mediation step applied to a response message. We wrap the request message in SOAP, pass it on to the web service, and then we unwrap the response message so that XML is returned to the client. As you would expect, we declare a new HTTP in endpoint, and this routes to our wrap in SOAP envelope mediation. Here we see in the request steps the wrap SOAP step, and in the response steps we have a copy statement which copies the contents of the SOAP body into the message, effectively overwriting the SOAP envelope. As this mediation routes on to the log and count mediation, we get all the functionality as described in the previous use case. Here we can see the web service tester sending XML over HTTP to the new endpoint. This next use case accepts the same messages, but this time in an email. We can reuse the mediations from the previous use case. Here we see a declaration of the email in transport with the configuration details for that user account, and again we see the polling interval expressed using the cron syntax. As you would expect, sending a message to the web service is simply a matter of sending some XML in an email message. The final use case shows a simple route. Here we have HTTP requests coming in and being distributed equally between two output directories. You can of course create routes using any of the transports and a variety of routing strategies. In this case we've used a round robin strategy. The XML configuration for this is as you would expect. We have a HTTP in transport, we have two file out transports, and in between we have a route, and the round robin strategy is declared within that. As you would expect, sending a request message to this new endpoint results in a file being created in the output directory. In this video presentation I've concentrated on the XML syntax of the assembly.xml file. In the GA of 7.5 we'll be providing a graphical editor. Here's a sneak preview of how this assembly.xml file is looking in an early version of that graphical editor. To summarize, we've seen 6 different use cases supported by mediations. If you have a copy of the tech preview, you'll be able to try these out for yourself. We've seen a variety of input transports and output transports, mediation steps, custom and pre-built. We've seen how the Spring framework is used to configure your custom steps. And we've seen how mediations can be used in conjunction with web services as message routing facility, or as standalone processing steps. I do hope you've enjoyed this demonstration, and thank you for listening.